Hey everyone, welcome back. And if you're new, welcome. So a few weeks ago, I talked about, I sort of mentioned in passing in the video about when the power went out. You can go back and look at it. Anyways, I mentioned a book I was reading and how it had changed my life when I originally read it, and that I was going to talk about it. Some of you guys have been on me about it because I haven't mentioned it yet. And it's not that I was trying to be cryptic or anything like that. It's just that life has been very busy, both personally and professionally. Things have been busy, stressful, just, a lot. And so I just haven't had the time to go through it. As I mentioned back then, I originally had this book and I lent it to a friend back in Calgary and never got it back. So I wanted to buy it again. And the reason is because I ended up seeing listening to the author's podcast, which reminded me about the book and got me to thinking that this would be a great little mini book review for me to give you guys, just in case maybe it was something that would help you. So what book am I talking about? I am talking about 10% Happier by Dan Harris. He was interviewed in the Minimalism documentary that I watched years ago, which really also impacted me. And I have talked about that before. And his story is so interesting that it got me wanting to read his book. He's a war correspondent and journalist, also news anchor. And when he was a correspondent in the war, he had spent a lot of time in combat situations in war-torn countries, seen some pretty difficult things, and ended up with PTSD that he was undiagnosed and he didn't realize he had. And he ended up self-medicating to the point where on national TV, as the anchor of a major daily news show, he had a panic attack in front of millions of people, which led him down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what was going on with him and find a way to deal with that and to sort of become, just get healthy. He's Jewish and very much a skeptic about religions, gurus, things like that. And so he, as part of his news career, ends up interviewing a lot of religious and spiritual leaders, always with a very skeptic mind. And it's really an eye-opening journey for him and fascinating to read. He ultimately discovers meditation, goes on this, I think it's a 10-day quiet meditation retreat, which is torturous for him and very entertaining to read. And he comes out with just a different mindset and still hungry and on the search for knowledge and wisdom and some sort of an insight. And what's so interesting about his story is the whole way through, he wants somebody to tell him, this is the thing. You do this one thing and it will lead to, all the happiness that you want, all the success that you want. I mean, he's a very driven, very ambitious young man in the story. And so, of course, none of those leaders can give him that because ultimately it all has to come from within, and it's a process, and it's not just one thing. There's not just one thing that can solve all of the problems. But he named the book 10% Happier because when he would talk to somebody about meditation, because he was excited about it and he wanted to tell people about it, but he lives in New York and surrounded by people who were just very secular and very, very cynical. They would all look at him like he was just a little, ooh, going a little, and so he would try to describe what meditation was doing for his life, and they would tune out. So he just one day decided to just off the cuff say to the person who asked, well, meditation makes me 10% happier. And that person just stopped and basically said, well, I want to be 10% happier. 10% happier seems doable. And that was sort of the changing point for how he approached it, talked about it and such. And when I read that, when I got to that point in the book, light bulbs, fireworks, everything went off in my head, because up until this point, you know, it was a very, very, very difficult time in my life. I was a single mom. I was dealing with a very toxic boss that I've talked about in a past video. I was really struggling financially, professionally, certainly emotionally. I was dealing with crippling anxiety and panic attacks and situational depression, and just struggling and focusing 100% on the kids, but beginning to feel like I would never be happy, that I would never get past this point. And when he said that, I thought to myself the same thing that the person he was talking to thought. 10% happier seems doable. 10%. I think we could all do 10%. If 10% is doable, 10% would be a big improvement. And so I just love this book, because it introduced me to the concept of 10%. 10% happier, 10% better, 10% more productive, 10% better, you know, faster, just everything. You can do everything in your world that you want to get better at. 10% seems doable. And 10% is not overwhelming, and 10% can make a huge difference. And when you set yourself that mindset, it's amazing how much better and how things can get, how much happier you can be, how much more productive you can be, how much calmer you can be, all of those things. And he basically, he says, you know, he basically says 10% happier, still 90% a schmuck, according to his wife. So it's not about perfection, but it was a great concept. And I loved it. And so it really helped me dive into the concept of being 10% happier. How do I get there? And, you know, get deeper into his journey and to his ultimate, not his final destination, because he's still on that journey, but, you know, to the place he got to by the end of the book. There are a lot of things that I've sort of highlighted and noted in the book, because just for reference, and because they were kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that sort of thing. But I'm just gonna go through, like, one of the first things he says in here, or it's early on, is he says that, you know, there's an expression that if you're finding meditation easy, you're probably doing it wrong. And that was really good for me, because I was really struggling when I first started meditating, learning how to meditate, that sort of stuff. And so he does go into some sort of tips that he learned, because, you know, he's not naturally a calm, Zen person. We worked in an industry where the more type A you are, the more ambitious you are, the more of a go-getter you are, the more successful you are. And he came into it very young, so he had extra to prove to the people around him. And he tells some really fascinating stories. And so if somebody like he can find a way to meditate, then I figured so could I. And I was pretty convinced early on that I needed to find a way to quiet my mind, because he talks about it here, and the Buddhists talked about us having what they call a monkey mind, which basically is, I think we all know what that means, right? That's, you know, your mind that just cannot stop going from one thing to another, to another, to another, always focusing on the worst case scenario, always focusing on the lack, what we're doing wrong, what's wrong with our lives, what's wrong with our world, all of those, how things could go wrong, all of those things. And that monkey mind is the thing that does not allow us to calm ourselves and to find peace. Most of us, certainly not me. And it's a work in progress, because our monkey mind doesn't just shut off. It's always there, and it's that self-talk, that script that you have, that you've either given yourself or your family has given you or your society, your community has given you, of everything that's wrong and everything that's wrong with you and why you'll never amount to anything, and all of those things. And even if you grew up in a loving, caring household, this world is very much focused a lot of the time on showing us what we don't have, what we aren't, where we're lacking, and how we could do better. And so we end up with those voices in our head and our monkey mind just chattering away at us. And so that is what the meditation is for, and what he was trying to achieve, and certainly what I needed. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. So if I do, I will pause it, but not yet. So anyways, there's some really interesting points in the book, because he meets Deepak Chopra, he meets some Christian leaders, he meets Eckhart Tolle. He ultimately sits down with the Dalai Lama, which is one of my favorite parts of it, because by that point he's already well into his journey, but he's still a skeptic when it comes to these spiritual leaders, and he is, sometimes it's well justified in some of the people that he ends up talking to, and but other times, like when he meets the Dalai Lama, he realizes how much of a preconceived notion he had going in. It was a very impactful discussion that he had with him. Dan Harris, the author, asked the Dalai Lama about a quote that is on his Twitter feed, because he had Twitter. You have a quote that I love. You say most of one's own troubles, worries, and sadness come from self-cherishing self-centeredness. So then Dan asks him, well, don't we need to be somewhat self-centered to be successful in life? And what the Dalai Lama says is, self-cherishing, that's by nature. Without that, we human beings become like robots with no feelings. So Dan has this light bulb go off in his head, and he says, it seems like you're saying that there is self-interest, that there's a self-interested or selfish case for being compassionate. And they were at a conference where scientists were presenting results about how meditation and compassion actually affected the brain and actually affected people's lives. The same centers in your brain lit up when you did something kind for somebody as when you ate chocolate or had something really pleasurable, and that it reduced the level of cortisol substantially, which of course an overabundance of cortisol, especially a long-term excess of cortisol, can lead to all sorts of things like cancer and dementia and depression, heart disease, all those things. And so they found, when they tested subjects where they had them meditate on a regular basis, and then they put them in controlled but stressful situations, that their brain chemistry reacted very differently than people who didn't do it. And that when people do something compassionate, when they volunteer, when they help out, it actually makes your brain better, which I thought was very, very interesting. There's evidence that compassion and meditation actually makes you a nicer person. And that's in the section that he calls the self-interested case for not being a dick, which I just love. He's very irreverent, and he does swear in there. So if that is not your cup of tea, then you definitely don't want to read this book. But it's not just all, vulgar or anything like that. He's just very much, the stereotypical skeptic, cynical, maybe New Yorker. Not that all New Yorkers are like that. Basically talking about karma is what he's talking about there. That by doing good for other people, it's not necessarily this like little puppeteer going, oh, you did this, so there will be the equal amount of that coming your way. That's not what he is meant by karma. It's that by doing good, by being compassionate, by being kind, you actually change your brain chemistry, and you start to live differently, and you start to see the good things and less of the bad things. And in a way, you're basically drawn towards the good and away from the bad so much. That's basically the science, the results that these scientists came up with, which was fascinating. So very, very interesting. But there's the section that I want to really go over here. He calls the 10 pillars of Zen. I adapted to fit, my needs and my life, and I want to share them with you because these are very much still to this day how I live my life, and I no longer think about it in a conscious way. When I first started out, practicing, I had to make myself act differently than my default reactions. And as I'm going through this, I'll explain. But I found them incredibly helpful. They changed my life. This book changed my life. Not because it's a gospel and that every word in it I follow, but it changed my mindset. And these 10 practices, these 10 habits are now my nature, self-consciously, the way I move through the world, and have brought me peace and more than 10% more happiness. So hopefully these will be useful to you in some way. Obviously, take what works, leave what doesn't. However, I would encourage you to consider them because none of these will do harm. The first one is, he calls it don't be a jerk. I call it be kind. And you know that's my tagline. You know that I say that all the time, that I want you to be kind to yourself and to others. When we move through the world being kind to others, sometimes not feeling that great and not feeling that compassionate. But if we default to kindness, then then we are calmer. So think of it this way. And I've said this to my kids, I used to be quite a hothead, which might surprise some of you who don't know me in real life and for a long time. I'm Portuguese and had a temper and, a passionate nature, I guess. That's why I talk with my hands. Not that all Portuguese people have, anger issues. But I used to, and I don't think I had anger issues, but I was quick to be very vocal, to push, to get angry at times, just a bit of a hothead. When I drove, if things were taking too long or I saw somebody doing something, that I didn't like. This was quite a long time ago, I just want to say. I'm talking about reading this book when the kids were little and I had become a single mom, and they were 10 and 4 when I became a single mom. So this was a long time ago because Keaton is 31. So, let's say about 20 years ago. And that, of course, never brought me happiness being that way. It was that, so I was self-righteous, but that never brought me happiness. But this conscious decision to be kind to people, to not be a jerk, just to move through the world in kindness was life-changing. That, I think, is just such a huge thing. And it's a process with every single one of these things. Eventually, it becomes a little easier or more your default, and before you know it, that is how that becomes your default setting. For me, that's my default setting, but I still have times when I'm not as kind as I would like to be, and that so it's important to realize again that it's a process, and you are constantly on that journey of being a better person, of being kinder in this case. So, but being kind is a huge one for me. And by that, I just mean, like he says, just don't be a jerk, right? Like, don't have being a jerk your default setting. Not you, not you guys, but like we just need to not have being an asshole be our default setting. If you act like a jerk, you feel like a jerk. Let's face it. Okay, so then he says, but when necessary, hide the Zen. People will say to me, yeah, but if you're kind, people walk all over you, right? You're just the doormat. No, that's not what this means. That means your default is to treat people with kindness, and also you need to be confident in yourself and your decisions, and confident in setting boundaries with people, because Dr. Phil said this once years and years and years ago, and I'm not a huge Dr. Phil fan, but I remember this one thing he said, and he said, you teach people how to treat you. And so if you allow people to treat you badly, you're basically saying, and obviously, please understand that I'm not talking about abusive situations where you have no control or power, obviously. But in the other 90% of our life, right, when we are dealing with people, coworkers, children, spouses, family members, friends, things like that, we do teach people how to treat us. And if we allow people to treat us badly, we are saying to them, that's okay. I'm okay with that, because I've allowed you to do it. And I allow you to do it again. And I allow you to do it again. And that is a huge thing to remember. And so if you keep that in mind, and you keep in mind that it's okay to set boundaries and be confident and actually firm in those things, then that's very empowering. And so when you're setting those boundaries, you're not being a jerk about it. You're just being calm and straightforward and setting those boundaries. And I've always said, no is a full sentence. It doesn't have to be no but. I often will give a reason, because, you know, the people I'm talking to are people that I care about, and, you know, we have a relationship that I value. But I have in the past with people that I don't have a close relationship with and who are not listening, just said no. Just no. But why? It doesn't matter why. Just no. Not going to happen. Will not be there. Will not be doing that. Just no. And it's hard at first. It's so hard at first. And with one family member, it took me almost a year to get to the point of saying no. But then I did it, and it was life-changing. So number one is being kind, but number two is being confident and setting boundaries. Is just such a great practice to put into play, and it will also change your life. So number three is meditation, and this is probably the scary one for a lot of people out there. And like Dan says earlier in his book, if you think meditation's easy, you're probably doing it wrong. And why do I say that? Because I'm not trying to scare you off. I'm trying to make you I'm trying to give you a reason to give yourself a break. When I started meditation, I was under the impression that meditation meant emptying your mind and finding that Zen place. So I would go to yoga, and we would be doing our little meditation, and I would be thinking about, what am I making for dinner? Oh, I gotta do that at work. Oh, the kids. Oh, gotta meditate. My toes itchy. Oh, I gotta do laundry. All of those things. And what I realized in studying meditation and becoming better at it is that meditation is not the practice of emptying your mind. Meditation is the practice of giving your mind something mindless to focus on, so that you can quiet that monkey part. And also, meditation is understanding that your mind will wander, becoming aware of it wandering, and bringing it back. And meditation also doesn't have to be half hour, hours long. It can be a 1 minute meditation, a 5 minute meditation. I will often do a 1 or 2 minute meditation before a meeting that I feel is going to be a little bit more difficult. And I'll just sit at my desk, and I will focus on my breathing, or I will focus on the birds. And then my mind will go to the meeting, and I'll go, nope, back over here. What's that bird doing? Or, oh, I can feel the little hairs in my nose as I'm breathing in and out. It doesn't matter, because those things allow the rest of your mind to just, and it allows your blood pressure to come down. The understanding, the acceptance that meditation will be difficult at first. It will always be work. That's why they call it a practice, not a done. And that your mind, that little monkey mind in there, wants to, and you just need to go, nope, you're back over here. Nope, you're back over here. And that's why you focus on the breath. That's why you focus on the sound of the wind in the leaves. That's why you focus on the birds, or the sound of your heartbeat if you can hear it, or whatever. Those things will allow your mind, the rest of your mind, to be calm, because you're not trying to think of nothing, because that's impossible. If I say, don't think about an elephant, what did you just think about? The elephant. And so you can't empty your mind, but you can give your mind something to focus on that is mindless, and therefore it calms the rest of your mind. And so meditation is huge. And he gave an example of meditation in here that I still use to this day. And it is the compassionate meditation. And here's how it goes. And you can practice this at any time. And you sit in a comfortable position. You don't have to sit in a lotus position, cross-legged on the floor. You can if that's comfortable for you. You can lay down. You can sit on the couch. You can sit with your feet flat on the floor. However works for you. But a comfortable position that you can sit in for a couple of minutes. And then you just, in your mind, it's called a compassionate meditation for a reason. Because in your mind, you picture a person. And you're going to picture a number of people here, right? You're going to start with a person that is maybe not your favorite person. Maybe you're struggling with, maybe you don't like. And you're going to picture them. And in your mind, you're going to say, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. And may you be loved. And then you let them float out. And then you choose maybe somebody else, maybe your kids or a family member that's struggling. And you say the same thing. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be loved. You can use whatever words you want there, but those are the ones that I use. And I just move through the people in my world. And then I put it out to the world in general. And then the final thing is me. I say it to myself. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be loved. And that might feel very woo to you. But nobody knows what you're saying in your head. And you don't have to, you're not doing it in front of other people. But that compassion, sending that compassion out, it's a way of, again, occupying your mind, but it is very calming and it's very healthy. And so I do that. I do other types of meditations as well. But that is one that's easy to do and allows you to just send love and peace to people wherever they are in the world. So I think that this number 3 one is very important, and it's been very powerful in my life. Number 4, let go of the need for control. Now he calls it the price of security is insecurity. But the way, like I say, I've rephrased these as the way I needed them to be. So this one for me is let go of the need to be in control. And this is huge because I am a recovering perfectionist, control freak. And I would hold on so tight to trying to control things that I never felt like I was in control of anything. And that was a horrible feeling. And I spent a lot of years in that place. And when I started embodying this, I started consciously trying, it's a process, of letting go of control, realizing that I can't control anything that happens in the world. I cannot control how other people behave. I can't control so many things in this world. The only thing I can control is how I react to those things that are out of my control. And that is a huge realization. It takes a while to do this, but if you can do it, even to a small extent, it is huge. Because we are always so frustrated when other people don't behave the way we want them to behave, whether they're politicians or our children, our spouses, our coworkers. But we have no control over those people, and they have no control over us. And if we come to that realization that the only control we have is how we react to people, we're actually taking back our control, our power, because we're not letting other people control us, if that makes sense. So letting go of the need to be in control, and realizing that, as my sister-in-law likes to say, control is an illusion. And I used to joke, yeah, but I like my illusions. But now I no longer do that. I still work hard. I still have goals that I work towards, and I still do my very best for those things. But I no longer am fixated on having just this tight grip control over everything in the world, in my world, because control is an illusion. She was absolutely right. Thanks, Carolyn. Number 5, he calls it equanimity is not the enemy of creativity. But the way I phrase this is that quieting the mind is how you find the answers. And I've talked about this a little bit in the video that I made about how walking almost every day was really, sort of changing things for me. Because that is one of the ways I meditate. There is a thing, it's a thing called walking meditation. And you're not walking around with your eyes closed, bumping into things. It's basically, as I said earlier, the walking is sort of occupying your mind, right? You're looking around. I usually go by the ocean, but even in the forest, doesn't matter where. And as I'm walking, I consciously try and let go of those other things and just focus on the birds, the trees, the things I'm seeing, that sort of stuff. And it's when I am in that state that I get, this has happened so many times that I know it's not just a one-time thing. It's not just in my imagination. So many times when I am in that state is when I have come up with a solution, found an answer, an understanding even, right? Just sort of, or an acceptance of something that has been challenging or difficult or, heavy on my mind. It happens often in that state first thing in the morning. It's usually around 4:30 in the morning, 5-ish, when I always wake up before my alarm when I'm sort of in that state right between dream and awake, not quite awake. When my father-in-law has a great expression. He says it all the time, and it's the best. He says, I was thinking whilst I was sleeping. And that's what I imagine he means. When your mind is in that such rested state that it's not occupied by the monkey chatter, that things become clear, or I think of ideas for videos, I get creative ideas, all sorts of stuff. And so quieting the mind, and it doesn't have to be a formal meditation or anything like that, like the previous point, but just in any way that makes sense. It could be going out on the lake. It could be kayaking. It could be going for a walk. It could be just sitting down on a comfortable chair with a cup of tea or coffee and listening to the birds in the trees or your kids playing in the backyard. But it's that quietness of the mind that allows that creative and problem-solving part of our minds to now be able to let you know the things that it's trying to tell you. So quieting of the mind, this number 5, is really, really valuable. Okay, number 6, what he calls don't force it. And I call be okay with not getting it right and embrace your imperfections. So as I said earlier, recovering control freak here and perfectionist. I'm a Virgo, and those of you out there who are Virgos who have Virgos around you will probably understand what I'm talking about. We are, in general, perfectionists. There'll be at least one area of a Virgo's life that they are obsessive about it being perfect, whether it's it being tidy and clean, their work, their appearance, doesn't matter. And when it's not, like especially early on when I was a single parent, my world was chaos. It was always chaos. I had 2 kids. I was dealing with the fallout of an ending of a marriage, being out on my own, financially responsible, and I had no feeling of control. So we've talked about that earlier, but I was still trying to make this, to keep things at the same sort of standard that I used to have them. And that was an impossible goal to set. And I had to learn to be okay with good enough. So basically, what this could be called is good enough, my friends. And that is life-changing. If it gets better than good enough, awesome. But if everybody went to bed breathing, fed, happy, clean, ready for the next day, it was all good, right? If I remember to put on two of the same shoes in the morning before I went out the door, excellent. Set your bar fairly low so that you can start to feel like, okay, and then you can move it up. But letting go of being of perfection and accepting that good enough is good enough is life-changing, and that includes giving yourself that break as well. That you're doing the best you can, and you know what? The best you can is good enough. This number 7, I think, is one that so many in today's world could do with a little of. Again, and it's one that was a hard one for me to learn, hard lesson for me to learn and embody. And as I said before, everything is a work in progress, right? And it's that just remembering that you're no better than anybody else. And also, nobody is better than you. And the comparison game and the need to feel superior on a high horse, that your point of view, your belief system, your ethnicity, all of those things, social situations, job, whatever, makes you better than somebody else, makes me better than somebody else, is absolutely false. And by default, nobody out there is better than you. And that's an important thing to remember as well. Those two concepts are the mirror image of each other, but they're both just as important. So, you need to have humility. And when you succeed, you need to remember to be humble. I need to remember to be humble, and that I'm no better than anybody else. And also, when somebody else succeeds, it doesn't take anything away from me. And so I can be happy for that person. I can be, congratulate them and truly be happy for them, even knowing that they have something better, what I think is better than I do. Because if they've achieved something, whether it's through hard work or good luck, it doesn't matter. That's a wonderful thing. It doesn't make them better than me, but it also doesn't make me superior because I'm looking down on them because they have it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It's just that reminder that I'm no better than anybody else. And then by default, that means that nobody is better than me. And so we're all on that same level. It is kind of a life-changing concept because we live in a world of comparison. Spent any time on social media lately? You know what I'm talking about, right? Even Facebook can be so frustrating because, you see people there posting their pictures of their kids and their families and their vacations and their cars. And it's easy for us to think, wow, everybody's got everything and I don't have anything, right? And we either feel like we're less, or we start to want to bring them down because that makes us feel better about ourselves. That, my friends, there be dragons over there. We need to, all of us, we need to remember that we're all doing the best we can, that people are, what you see is not always what you get, right? And that we are all the same. Nobody's better. We're not better, and nobody's better than us. So I think that that's really an important point. Number 8, he calls it go easy with a cattle prod. I call it remember to forgive yourself. I don't know about you, but when I think back to one of those times, I actually feel it in my gut. I can feel the shame. I can feel the pain. I can feel the regret. I can feel the self-loathing that comes with remembering those things, all of that. And not only is that pointless, it's also very unhealthy. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We have all of us, to varying degrees, dealt with shitty things in our life, with difficult things in our life, with challenges in our lives, where we have had bad things done to us, or we've done bad things. And what's important to remember is that is not who you are. That's who you were. And so that's a life-changing realization. What I mean by that is we need to stop focusing on what has happened. Obviously, there are some things that you can't get past. And we are not talking about those things. But for the majority of the things that I'm describing, certainly the things in my life that I'm thinking about, falls into the so what area or section of my life. That's not the right word. Category. That's it, of my life. So I was a shitty person. So I did that. So this happened, right? Like that's what we have in our minds. We need to think of it as the so what phase. The what that matters is the what now. And that is what we need to, where we need to be, right? So we need to acknowledge those things, let them go as much as possible. Certainly the ones that we had a part in. Stop beating ourselves up for it. And just frame that as the, okay, that's the so what category. The what now is what matters. This is, what am I going to do now? How do I behave now? How do I treat people now? How do I allow people to treat me now? That is the now what category. And that is where our focus needs to be, because that is the only place we have any control. We no longer have control of the past. We have no control over the future. In reality, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. The only thing I can control is this moment right now, me talking to you. I can control that, in that I have some say. I can express myself. The now what is what matters, and we need to forgive ourselves, give ourselves compassion, acknowledge the things that have happened and that we have done, and then put them into that so what category. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're not taking responsibility for any of the actions that that I've done. We're not doing that. We are now just putting it in that category. And instead of living in the past and always beating ourselves up for something that we have no control over and cannot change, we're now choosing to focus in the now what category, right? That's what I mean by this. And I think that is really very healthy and life-changing. And again, a practice. All right, so number 9 is, he calls it non-attachment to results. I call it not fixating on the outcome, right? It's, it's so easy, especially professionally, to always be fixating on having to succeed, always doing, better, and always fixating on the outcome. And most of the things that we do in our world are a journey. And if we are constantly fixating on what we envision as the successful destination, then one, we're not enjoying the journey at all. We're not enjoying the process. And two, we're so attached to what we consider the successful outcome that if anything but that very small picture that we have in our minds happens, we feel like failures. We feel like we failed. And we have to let that go. I had to let that go. And you've heard me say that, I always try to be present when I'm with my kids, when I'm doing something, sometimes just for self-care. I'm just going to take some time and just do nothing except self-care is something. And I don't have to have a result. I don't have to be doing something that's productive every second of every day. Sometimes just being, sometimes the journey is the point. And I would argue that sometimes failing is the lesson that we're meant to learn, is the point of it all. And when we can really try to let go of what we think is the successful outcome, life is richer, experiences are better and more exceptional and more beneficial. And I for sure, have ended up at a different place, a different result than what I first thought I wanted and needed and was aiming for, and had that be so much better, or have learned so much from that failure that it just changed my direction, my path, and has led me to something so much better. Because by doing that, we free ourselves up to, just noticing the lessons that are there to be learned, and experiencing the richness of the journey of learning those lessons. And finally, I would say number 10, and this one is a huge one, and one that I think I've gotten pretty good at, but am still constantly reminding myself about, is to focus on what really matters. I read this book years and years ago. It was a little coffee table book. Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. And the premise is that if a month from now, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, you would be telling this story and laughing about it, or telling it and not still being devastated about it, it wasn't a big deal. And there are some things in our lives that are big deals, right? An illness, a serious illness, the loss of somebody you love, the loss of your home. There's some things in this world that are devastating, that are big things. But the majority of the things that have happened in my life have not been that. What would be a big deal for me? One of my kids getting seriously injured or sick, me getting seriously injured or sick, something happening to Sophie. Losing my house would be a big deal, but it's just stuff. So while it would be upsetting, it's maybe halfway there, but there are very few things that at this point in my life that I would consider the big stuff. The majority of it is the small to kind of medium stuff, and I don't sweat it. I, deal with it. I feel frustration and anger sometimes, but then I do, as we've talked about in the other points, I let it go because I realize it's done, cannot control it. In the past, that falls into the so what category. Will it make a good story? Will it make a good video? Then, not big stuff. And so knowing what's really important, and what to me, what matters in this world are the people that I love, and that little furry hairball that's asleep under my quilt on my bed, right? The people that I care about, people in general, that's what matters. See everything else in perspective, because not everything can be a big deal. Because again, we'll drive ourselves crazy if everything is a priority, a big deal, big stuff. I don't know how many times I've said to myself, while this is annoying, frustrating, an expensive mistake, whatever, this is not a big deal. This is an annoyance. This is not a big deal. And telling myself that really helps me put things into perspective when my mind wants to go off and start to fixate and go down that rabbit hole. Just knowing what really matters in your life, making it something like family, friends, your own health, that sort of thing, your pet, is just such a great way to ground yourself. And it's a great way to move through the world, and really can bring you a lot of peace in a world that maybe can be a little chaotic. So that is my quick book review on 10% Happier. Obviously, this is a story, right, of his life, and it's very interesting. He's a good writer. It's very entertaining. And I have distilled down the points that it left me with, and the way it changed the way I think about things and the world. It came to me at just the right time, just when I need it, as things often do. And I was able to take away what I needed in order to get through a very difficult part of my life and start to move into a much better place and move through the world happier, healthier, calmer, always with the understanding that it is a work in progress, as we all are. I hope you found that interesting. Again, it's just a book. He's just a guy. He's not a guru. He just has some really good insights, and this journey to finding those insights was really fascinating. He has a podcast that I listen to while I'm working, and at the end of the podcast episodes, there's usually just a really quick meditation, which is awesome. On his website, he also has meditations, which can be really great. But I love that the whole concept of 10% happier. Putting those 10 practices into place in my life very quickly made me 10% happier, and has continued to make me happier, healthier, more, just more peaceful. Let me know if you read it. Let me know if you listen to his podcast, if you saw him on the Minimalism documentary, all that sort of stuff. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're staying safe. As always, remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, including to yourself. I love you, and I'll see you next time.